Hello, fight fans, and welcome to another edition of Monday Night Fight Talk. I am your host, Dylan Brewski, and we do have a lot to talk about today. We just are 2 days off of a great fight night card. I mean, that was really sneaky good. I saw it all over social media, person after person just posting about how sneaky good this card was, and it was very exciting. A few comebacks to win their fights, and we're going to take a deep dive into that. Plus, UFC is going back to London for the first time in 3 years, and they brought a major card out for that one. I'll be doing some fight predictions for some of the fights on that card, not every single one. But let's take a deep dive into the fight night that happened 2 days ago, main evented by Thiago Santos and Magomed Ankalaev. And honestly, the main event was almost one of the most boring fights of the night, which is hard to say usually, but you could definitely tell that both of these guys respected the other. Both have a lot of power in their punches and their strikes and everything, so it seemed like both fighters were playing it fairly safe. We saw Thiago Santos get more aggressive in little spurts, but for the most part he kind of held back. And Magomed Ankalaev also did say before or after the fight in the post-fight interview that he wanted to kind of see if he can go the full 5 rounds in a main event, because this was his first main event fight in the UFC. Obviously, he did that. He looked pretty good. I expected him to actually implement the grappling a little bit sooner with a guy like Thiago Santos, who's known for his power and his striking ability. But nonetheless, once the 4th round hit, Ankalaev got the takedown late in the 4th round, and then he kind of dominated from the ground in the 5th round, ultimately winning by decision. I believe 2 judges had it 49-46, 1 judge had it 48-47, all in favor of Ankalaev. But overall, it kind of showed that Ankalaev was a bit better than Thiago Santos, but Thiago Santos still has it. He looked actually very good. I was very impressed with him, especially in the 2nd and 3rd round. He looked fairly good, but Magomed Ankalaev, he's in my opinion, I believe he will be a future champion. He does need to do a couple more fights, I think, 1 to 2 at least, for a shot at the title. Unfortunately for him, it seems like the top 4, including the champion and the light heavyweight rankings, are kind of booked up right now, with obviously Glover Teixeira and Yuri Prochazka fighting. And then it sounds like Jan Blachowicz and Alexander Rakic want to reschedule their fight. So it sounds like they're going to be locked up. But Anthony Smith is still sitting there at number 4 for right now. That might change. He might get jumped by Ankalaev, but I think that would be a good next fight for Ankalaev, considering he doesn't really have anyone else to face that's higher ranked than him at the moment besides Anthony Smith. So that's what I look forward to in Magomed's future. But like I said, this card was absolutely phenomenal. There was so many great fights and a lot of great finishes. I believe 9 of the 14 fights, or 8 of the 14 fights, were finishes. And you don't see really that high of a finish rate in a lot of cards. But one of the big finishes, and actually earned him a performance of the night, was in the co-main event. Song Yadong absolutely rocked Marlon Moraes to the point where he didn't even have to go follow him afterwards. And usually you'll see a couple strikes on the ground. No, Marlon Moraes was completely out in the 1st round. Song Yadong looked absolutely phenomenal. He looked fast. He looked powerful. He looked a step ahead of Marlon Moraes the entire fight. Even though it was a fairly short fight, Marlon Moraes actually was this was his last legs, and he may have retired. I haven't seen a report that it's 100% official that he is retired, but he was taking his gloves off in the octagon and all that. So, I mean, he's on a 4-fight losing skid. He keeps dropping in the rankings, and these young guys are coming up like Song Yadong and beating him pretty handily. But major props to Song Yadong in this fight. Something I look forward to him. I know he called out Dominic Cruz in the post-fight interview, but I feel like a lot of people in the bantamweight division call out Dominic Cruz trying to fight him because he's kind of that stepping stone to you're a championship contender, or you still need to take a few fights before you can be a contender. So I don't see Song Yadong getting the Dominic Cruz fight, but one fight I would think is very, very exciting is if him and Sean O'Malley went at it. Both very young, exciting fighters, up and coming in the rankings. Both have crazy knockout power, crazy hand speed. I think it would be an absolutely entertaining fight. So that's what I look forward to with Song Yadong in the future. And that would draw a lot of attention to whoever won that fight in that division. And the bantamweight division is insanely deep right now. So it would be a huge win for either one of those guys. But again, it's hard to say with Moraes because we don't really know if he's going to fight again to even say like who a good opponent would be. But moving on to another ranked matchup, the one right before Moraes and Yadong, Sadiq Youssef versus Alex Caceres. I was actually pretty surprised by the way this fight went down. I actually picked Alex Caceres to win by submission, but he couldn't get anything going on the ground. And the story of this entire fight was Sadiq Youssef was absolutely destroying Caceres' legs. I believe he landed like 34 significant leg kicks. And you can tell once the end of the second round and then into the third round, you could tell that they were hurting Caceres really bad. He couldn't use his awkward movements that he's used in the past to win his fights to get an advantage in this fight. Sadiq Youssef looked very phenomenal in this fight. And something I want to see for Sadiq Youssef in the future, he also called someone out afterwards. He called out Bryce Mitchell, which I think that would be a very fun fight to watch, but I believe Bryce Mitchell is kind of, I don't want to slight Youssef, but he's kind of looking past Youssef. He's wanting to fight fighters that are ahead of him in the rankings, where Youssef might be jumping to 10 because Dan Ige and Edson Barboza are obviously off of losses, so he could jump both of them. I do see him at least jumping Barboza, but I don't see that as being a very big, like a very likely fight to happen in the future between Bryce Mitchell and Sadiq Youssef, at least immediate future. I mean, who knows down the line. But there are some interesting fights in that featherweight division. I wouldn't mind seeing him and Dan Ige. I think that would actually be a very good fight. But other than that, it's kind of hard to say what would be next for Sadiq Youssef. And then moving on to actually after the fight, it was very emotional. Khalil Roundtree versus Carl Roberson. Roundtree is terrifying. Oh, the power that man possesses. And then to basically turn it all off afterwards and to have a heartfelt interview with Paul Felder afterwards where he was brought to tears. He was brought to tears in the post-fight press conference also. He wants to tell his story, and I believe that this is the best way to do it. But man, that fight was scary. The finish was scary. I mean, the soccer kick to the body hit him like right in the ribs. I was convinced. I don't know if it's come out and said that he has broken anything or he hit anything, but I thought at first Carl Roberson broke his ribs because Roundtree soccer kicked him so hard. And you don't see that utilized a whole lot because you don't want to accidentally kick them in the head while they're down, and then you could get disqualified. I mean, we're about to have a title fight rematch that the title changed hands because of that. Petr Yan illegally kneeing Aljamain Sterling on the ground. You don't see a lot of soccer kicks because who knows if the person ducks their head down and bam, you just kicked them in the face. And now they might not be able to go on. You get disqualified and all that. But overall, great performance by Roundtree. It was a dominant victory, and I hope that he can resurge his career. I know he's had a lot of ups and downs in his UFC career, but I've always liked him. I've always liked watching him, so I wish him nothing but success. Moving on to... This might have been the craziest fight of the night, and it was only like 4 minutes. Drew Dober versus Terrence McKinney was absolutely insane. Terrence McKinney came out, and he rocked Drew Dober a couple times. I mean, it was 2 or 3 times that you were like, is he going to finish this fight? 2 weeks after finishing a fight in 2 minutes? And Drew Dober stuck with it. He didn't get all the way knocked out. He just kept going. And eventually Terrence McKinney gassed. He gassed himself out trying to get that finish so early. Drew Dober took advantage. Drew Dober being the veteran of that fight and being able to compose himself, and then ended up getting the TKO victory and a comeback win against Terrence McKinney. But you still have to give major props to Terrence McKinney. In the first few minutes, he did look really good. And like I said, I mean, he fought 2 weeks ago. He was in a fight 2 weeks ago, took this fight against Drew Dober, who is scary. Drew Dober is not someone that a lot of people want to face. He's very strong. He's very physical. And for Terrence McKinney to do that, you have to give him a lot of props in that sense. But also you do have to give props to Drew Dober for sticking with it after getting hit with a few knees where you didn't think he was going to recover, and then to come back, compose yourself, and get the TKO victory all in the same round. Major props to both fighters. It was an amazing fight, and I can't wait to see where both of these guys go in the future. And then the fight that started off the main card was awesome too. Alex Pereira versus Bruno Silva. Obviously two phenomenal strikers. Alex Pereira, major kickboxer. He doesn't have a lot of MMA experience. I believe this was his 6th MMA fight. Professional MMA fight at least, but he is a known professional kickboxer before that. Bruno Silva being a veteran of the octagon, being around for a long time. I thought Bruno Silva was going to take this. I thought the experience, and there was a few times where he looked really good, but Alex Pereira's kickboxing was just perfect. I mean, he would find these crazy angles, and he would just catch Bruno time after time. There was some signs of immaturity. You saw a couple times where I believe in the second round he looked over at his corner and was confused, and Bruno Silva didn't take advantage of that. But who knows later down the line if he tries to do something like that. You don't take your eyes off your opponent. Your opponent could knock you out in one shot, especially with the middleweights. I mean, any weight can knock you out with one shot, but when you approach the 185 and up, I mean, that's really one-punch knockout power. And I feel like Pereira's a little lucky that Silva didn't take advantage of him taking his eyes off of him for, I mean, it was a solid 2-3 seconds where Bruno Silva would have had free range to just punch him in the face. But ultimately, Pereira looked really good other than that. He had great kickboxing the entire fight. Major props to Alex Pereira and getting the decision victory. Another fight I want to talk about, J.J. Aldrich versus Jillian Robertson. Another fight that I kind of saw going a different way. I thought that Jillian Robertson's grappling was going to be killer in this fight, and she was going to dominate J.J. Aldrich, but I don't even know if I think she got one takedown in the entire fight. J.J. Aldrich fought an almost perfect fight. She even got a takedown on Jillian at the end of the second round, I believe. And J.J. Aldrich, for the rest of the fight, just did what she does best, and that's precision striking. She's not the most powerful. She's not going to knock you out a lot of the time, but she's so technical. And kind of like Alex Pereira in the last fight I was talking about, she's very precise with her strikes. She can find weird angles and just catch you. And ultimately, J.J. Aldrich pretty much dominated that fight. You saw when they went to the judges, Jillian Robertson was already clapping for J.J. Aldrich winning the fight before they even announced it. It was very obvious, but great sportsmanship by Jillian Robertson. I know both of these girls have a lot of respect for each other, but overall, I just want to give major props to J.J. Aldrich. And another female fight that happened, Sabina Mazo versus Miranda Maverick. This was a little bit different. This one, the grappling did take over the striker in this one. Miranda Maverick had great grappling. Mazo actually is very good at defending the takedown. I believe they said that the most time she's been taken down in a fight was twice, and Miranda Maverick broke that in the first round, taking her down 3 separate times. And then she got her to the ground again in the second round, eventually got to the back, locked in the rear naked choke, and was able to win it. And like I said last week, I mean, Miranda Maverick and Sabina Mazo were coming off 2 straight losses. So whoever was going to win, this was going to be a huge win for them. And Miranda Maverick came out and she looked phenomenal. She got a big win under her belt against a very tough opponent in Sabina Mazo. A couple other fights I want to shortly get on. More props to certain fighters. Cody Brundage and Asmat Mirzakhanov both had amazing comebacks. Like I said, with the Terrence McKinney and Drew Dober, and then in the beginning, there was 3 separate comeback finishes in this entire thing. Both Brundage and Mirzakhanov were down and out, and it did not look good for either one of them, especially Asmat. I mean, he got beat for 2 rounds, and then all of a sudden he caught Chukwi with that knee, and Chukwi was out, and it was like, and we thought Asmat was done. I mean, he looked gassed at the end of the second round, but he was able to come back, persevere, and get the finish. And another one I want to touch on is Semelsberger. He looked outmatched in that first round. AJ Fletcher's wrestling in the first round was absolutely phenomenal. I'm actually kind of surprised that not one of the judges gave him a 10-8 on that. I thought there was going to be a majority draw win for Semelsberger because he obviously got the second and third round, but Fletcher absolutely dominated the fight in the first round, but major props to Semelsberger for coming back in the second and third and getting the decision victory after winning the last 2 rounds. But again, I can't say enough about this fight night that happened 2 days ago. It was so much fun to watch. But that's not all I want to talk about. I mean, this London fight card that's coming up this Saturday is absolutely stacked. I know the UFC wanted to do a very big card on this night because it's the first time they've been in the UK in 3 years, and they did not disappoint. Starting off with a great main event between the rising star Tom Aspinall and the 6'7" major powerful striker, Alexander Volkov. I mean, this fight is the definition of one-punch power. But that's not really what either of these guys are most known for. They're both amazing strikers. I was just watching Tom Aspinall's last fight, or not his last fight, 2 fights before against Andrei Arlovsky, and his hand speed is insane for a heavyweight. For someone to be that big and be that fast is so scary. Alexander Volkov, I mean, like I said, he's 6'7", and he's faced the best of the best in this division. I mean, he was beating Derek Lewis before Derek Lewis caught him and knocked him out in the 3rd round. He was dominating Derek Lewis, but ultimately got caught. So I am very, very excited for this fight. Ultimately, I do believe that Aspinall, he can take it to the ground, and I think the well-roundedness of his fight style will come in handy for him, and I do think he's going to win this fight. I think he's actually going to knock out Alexander Volkov, which is no easy task, but I have it as a 2nd-round TKO for Tom Aspinall, and he continues to climb the ranks in the heavyweight division. The UFC keeps changing what they're putting as the co-main event. I'm going to talk about Paddy Pimblett versus Kazula Vargas first, because that's what their website has right now as the co-main event. So I'm going to go in order. I'm going to talk about that one. Man, Paddy Pimblett, Paddy the Baddie, he's coming back after a very, very exciting debut. He's going to have the home crowd, and I'm telling you, I cannot wait to hear the pop of the O2 Arena when Paddy Pimblett starts walking out, because it's going to go absolutely nuts, and I think that's going to translate into the fight. They're both amazing strikers. They both have a lot of power, both up-and-coming fighters, but ultimately, I think the crowd's going to play a big factor. I think Paddy's going to feed off of the crowd, and I believe it's going to be a fairly short fight. I'm going 1st round knockout for Paddy Pimblett as he continues his rise in the ranks and continues to impress everybody in his short time in the UFC. Next up, like I said, this might be the co-main event. I'm not 100% sure what they're going to do, but Arnold Allen versus Dan Hooker. This is kind of tale of 2 fighters. Arnold Allen is on one of the longest active win streaks in the UFC right now. I believe it's 7 or 8 straight wins for Arnold Allen, where Dan Hooker has been kind of on a slump lately. He's lost 3 of his last 4. Granted, the 3 that he lost to are Islam Makhachev, Michael Chandler, and Dustin Poirier, who are all top 5 ranked in that division. So it's kind of hard to be like, is he on in a slump, or is he just facing the best of that division right now? Dan Hooker has a lot more power. Obviously, he's coming from lightweight, moving down to featherweight, where Allen is a much more technical fighter. He's not much of a knockout artist, but he can get the knockout, but he's more of a calculated, very precise striker. And I do believe that Allen will continue his win streak. I think it will be more of a volume versus power thing, where Allen's going to land a lot more shots, but Hooker will land the more powerful shots. I do think it goes to decision, but I do think Arnold Allen does continue his win streak and wins by decision in this fight. The next fight is another one-punch knockout power type fight between 2 humongous heavyweights, Shamil Abdurakhimov versus Sergey Pavlovich. This fight is going to be an absolute banger. I don't see any way that this fight goes to decision, not with the power that these 2 possess. And I know that Pavlovich hasn't been active in the UFC since 2019, but ultimately I think this is his time to come back. I think he picked a good time. He's got time to clear his head and everything, and I think he's looking to make a statement against a top 10 ranked guy in this division. And I say it's another first-round knockout by Pavlovich, and he gets himself back in the ranks as he just dropped out. That was more due to inactivity than him losing fights, but still, this is going to be an absolutely exciting fight. I can really see either one of these guys winning. It's going to be who connects with the cleaner shot first, basically, because, again, these guys are one-punch knockout guys, and it's going to be insanely fun to watch. Next up, we have Nikita Krylov versus Paul Craig. Two extremely well-rounded fighters. I mean, they both have the thing they're better at, but they also don't go to decision too often, but they can go to the ground if they want to. They can stand up and strike. Craig, I do believe, will be more inclined to try to get it to the ground. He is more of a grappler, more of a submission guy, where Krylov seems to be able to finish a fight wherever he is. He can submit you, he can knock you out, and I ultimately think that and his experience in the octagon will help him out tremendously, and he will win this fight. That will be the big difference. I think it will be a second round TKO, as Krylov will try to keep it on the feet as much as possible, because like I said, Paul Craig is more comfortable on the ground, so Krylov's going to try to make him at least a little bit more uncomfortable. And then we have the classic grappler versus striker match next. Gunnar Nelson versus Takashi Sato. Nelson loves to get fights to the ground. He loves to use jiu-jitsu. And he submits a lot of people in the cage. Where Sato, he's actually struggled a lot against grapplers. He's had 4 fights in the UFC. He's 2-2 in those fights. Both fights he lost by submission. The 2 fights he won by knockout. Ultimately, I think Gunnar Nelson, he is the more experienced fighter. He is an insanely good grappler. And until I see Sato do better against the grappling, I can't pick him in this fight. So I think Nelson will submit him in the second round. And next up, the featured prelim of the London fight card, Jay Herbert versus Ilia Topuria. This is another case of striker versus grappler. Jay Herbert is an insane knockout artist. He has so much power behind his strikes. And he's facing Topuria, who is the undefeated grappler. I feel like I'm predicting a lot of finishes. And I usually don't like to do that because, like I said about the last fight card, you don't usually see 8, 9 finishes in a card of 14 fights. But, man, it's hard because when you look at all these fighters on this card, there's so high finish rates. There's so many high finish rates from these guys. And I feel like I have to pick another finish here. Topuria is going to be a little bit more cautious at first. I believe almost the entire first round he's going to be kind of hanging back, not trying to get hit with that knockout power that I was talking about with Herbert. But once later in the first round, maybe wait till the early second round, gets more comfortable in the octagon. I think he's going to start using the grappling, and I think that's going to be a huge advantage for him. I think he's going to end up submitting Herbert in the second round, improve to 12-0, and continue this reign of dominance. And then I want to talk about one of the women's fights, Molly McCann versus Luana Carolina. 2 fantastic strikers in the women's flyweight division. I mean, Carolina averages 4.5 significant strikes per minute, while Molly McCann averages almost 5.7 per minute, which is a crazy pace to hold up for that long because both of them have a very high decision rate. So it's not like they're doing this in the first round knocking their opponents out. They're doing this for long periods of time, 15 minutes. But there is one big difference when it comes to their striking, and that's the defense. Molly McCann gets hit a lot more. I believe that she absorbs 2+ more punches than Carolina does per minute. And ultimately, I think that might be the difference in this fight is Carolina is going to be a lot more, I don't want to say cautious, because obviously she's still throwing a lot too, but she's not going to get hit as much. She has better defense, and I think the judges will see that. So while I see it being a high input or high output from both of these fighters, I think Carolina is going to get the edge because she's not going to get hit as much. I think Carolina wins this fight by decision. Then the last fight I want to talk about, Jack Shore versus Tamir Valiev. This is another situation of a undefeated grappler versus the striker in Valiev. Jack Shore has been on an absolute tear since joining the UFC, winning his first 4 fights that he's had, and I expect that to continue on Saturday. I think he'll be able to get this fight to the ground, being the better grappler, and I believe he is itching for a finish after going the distance in his last 2 fights, but Valiev is very tough to finish. I do think it goes the distance ultimately, but I do think Jack Shore continues to be undefeated. I believe that would make him 16-0, but I do believe it is by decision. But that's all I got for today. I'm very excited for this London fight card. If it's anything like the Santos Ankalaev fight card, we are in for an absolute banger. I know I'm over here on the west coast of the U.S., so I know we got to wake up a little bit earlier. I believe the prelims start at 10 a.m., so that's not too bad, but I'm very excited. I can't wait, but until then, you can find me on Instagram at Monday Night Fight Talk. You can find me on Twitter at MN Fight Talk. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to see more content from me, go on SquaboSays YouTube channel. I do a live show with him and Steezy A. Smith every Fridays at 4. I also hop on Steezy A. Smith's YouTube channel every once in a while when he has a live. I'll be sure to post both of their links in the description. But thank you for listening to another edition of Monday Night Fight Talk. I will see you next week, same time, same place.